California's largest wildfire so far has been burning near a swath of property managed by one of the country's nuclear laboratories. So far, it is burning away from an area where explosives have been tested in the past. But massive heat waves this week are about to start, and fire crews across the state are on high alert. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. And tonight, the Coral Fire is 75% contained after scorching more than 14,000 acres since it first sparked up on Saturday. Now, this is happening near the city of Tracy, a city of about 100,000 just east of San Francisco. Now, winds have caused that fire to spread quickly, and it led to an evacuation order at one point. And this is why. The fire got dangerously close to homes and major interstates in that area. At least one home has been burned. 2 firefighters have been hurt. And that fire started on hills managed by the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, one of the country's key centers for nuclear weapons research. So far, lab officials say their site nearby hasn't been impacted, but they are monitoring that fire, and the cause is still under investigation. Now firefighters are racing to get this thing completely under control as soon as possible because a heat wave is about to hit that part of California in the middle of the week. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is standing by with the forecast. But first, let's go to NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin in Tracy, California. Dana, with the heat wave on the horizon, how's it looking out there?
Yeah, Gadi, behind me, you can see that home that you mentioned that burned. This is what conditions look like right now. You're not seeing those active flames that you saw over the weekend, which is a good sign because firefighters have gotten about 75% of this fire contained. But we saw some of them come through just a moment ago. They just wanted to check to make sure there were no hot spots because, as you know, those could reignite, which could, as the winds still blow, could, threaten other homes. And that's obviously what they don't want here. So right now, conditions are favorable to reach triple digits this week in areas like Sacramento, Phoenix, and even areas in Texas. So right now, officials are warning people to stay as cool as possible and hydrated as this heat wave kicks off this week. Gadi?
We still have a bit of a breeze, it looks like, behind you. Seems like some of those containment numbers are getting better right now. Is it safe for people to go back home yet?
I would say it's fairly safe. The road has reopened. We've seen the homeowner's son return to this home. They're obviously very heartbroken after losing their home, but they were able to walk through. But one thing that is a danger, you may not be able to see them, but maybe in the distance you can see some of this oak tree that fell behind me. This is the current threat here because you've got this tree that is burned out. And when trees are burned, they become hollow. And they become easy, it makes for them to easily topple over. So that's the concern. So if you're returning home and you've got vegetation and trees like this home has, you got to make sure you're looking up to monitor so that as you're walking through, those trees don't come tumbling down. And for people that were evacuating, it was chaos for a lot of people. Some people only had minutes to evacuate. Listen to what one homeowner said that journey was like for them.
We were trying to get through, and the flame was actually lapping up on the side of the trailers and on the side of my car. And the fireman told me just to follow him through. He took 3 steps and he disappeared. We didn't see him. So they rearranged the truck so we could see the lights at the top of the truck to drive out.
Yeah, and we saw images of similar situations where people actually had to stop on I-80, which is the nearby highway, because conditions were near zero visibility. So it was really tough to navigate through that heavy smoke at the time of evacuations. Gadi?
And Dana, it doesn't seem like there were any thunderstorms before this, so probably not lightning. Do we know what caused this?
Yeah, we don't know an official cause, but you can best believe it's going to be human cause. As you mentioned, Gadi, there were no thunderstorms, and so there's not a lot of other things that could have really tripped a fire. It could have been accidental, but we're still waiting for CAL FIRE to determine the exact cause of that fire. That's something that will take several days, if not weeks, possibly months, to pinpoint exactly what triggered this blaze that, as you can see behind me, took this home and scorched some 14,000 acres. Luckily, firefighters were able to get it under control. I'm told by one of their public information officers that the flames were as high as 5 feet because of that vegetation that had grown, just because we had such a wet winter. So it was a challenge for them to get these flames under control, but they managed to do a really good job. So right now the concern is keeping it contained so that it doesn't flare back up. Gadi?
Yeah, hopefully those containment numbers continue to grow. Dana, thank you. Yep. And let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns, who's standing by. Bill, this area of the fire is supposed to get hit by a heat wave this week. How much more of a risk does that present?
I would say it presents a risk for new fires. I think they got this one pretty much under control. But, with this forecast and our first significant heat wave, everything's drying out quickly. It'll be interesting over the next couple of days, especially if that breeze picks up. It's important to know how we got where we are. So 2 winters ago was record snow, record warmth. And then last summer was an incredibly hot summer. Death Valley hit 128. We had 26 days in a row, 105 in Vegas. Phoenix was exceptionally hot. But we didn't have a lot of fires last winter. It was actually a relatively down year. And then this winter, we just had a lot of snow and a lot of rain again. So that's 2 winters in a row where a lot of vegetation grew. We haven't had a lot of fires. So there's a lot of potential when this dries out this year. If fires form, we could get some rapid spread. So this is our first chance of that happening with the first significant heat dome. A lot of the stuff is still drying out. We're not towards the peak of the fire season, which is later in the summer into the early fall. But this is the beginning of it when it can start. And we have excessive heat warnings up for the first time. It goes from Tucson to Phoenix, Fresno, Sacramento. You start yours tomorrow at about 10 a.m. And so that's going to be one of the hotter spots tomorrow, 102 in Sacramento. And for coastal areas from San Diego to L.A., this is not a heat wave for you. The ocean marine layer is going to keep you cool enough, only 78 in downtown L.A. But interior sections, it's going to get very warm. Wednesday, Vegas 108, Sacramento 103, Phoenix jumps to about 109. And this should continue right through Thursday. Friday looks like possibly the peak. Notice Phoenix 112, 2 days in a row. Vegas above 110. Sacramento begins to cool off a little bit, coolish, by the time we get to Saturday. And you notice again, downtown LA never gets all that exceptionally warm, 80s to about 78 degrees, Gadi. So this is just the beginning of what should be a very hot summer. We'll have to see if we get lucky like last year and don't see significant fires. There wasn't really a rhyme or reason why we didn't have a lot last year. We were just fortunate.
Yeah, I don't know. Looking at that, I mean, that looks like a very toasty start to June there. And it's not just the heat wave out here in the West. We've got other parts of the country dealing with some pretty severe weather, right?
Yeah, we're coming out of what was a horrific May for tornadoes, and now we're in June. June's our 3rd most active month for tornadoes, but right now we don't have too much of a tornado threat. We have a big severe thunderstorm watch that continues here through Louisiana, southern Arkansas, now in the Mississippi, also an area here, Oklahoma, into Texas. Tomorrow, our severe weather threat takes us into the northern plains, but again, not too many tornadoes, more large hail and wind damage. So the calendar's changed, Gadi, from May to June, and it's almost like we went straight into summer just like that.
Yeah, it sure does. Bill Cairns, thank you. And just days after the high-profile Trump hush money case in New York, all eyes are on Delaware now, where for the first time ever, the son of a sitting president is facing a criminal trial. And this one is not about Hunter Biden's taxes. It's about a gun he bought back in October of 2018, where he ticked a box on a form saying he was not addicted to any drugs, when prosecutors say evidence shows he was. Because of that, he is facing 3 gun-related felony charges, lying to a federally licensed gun dealer, making a false claim on a federal gun application, and having an illegally obtained gun for 11 days in October of 2018. At one point, Hunter Biden and the Justice Department had agreed to a plea deal, which did not include any prison time, but that seemed to completely fall apart last July. We're going to talk about why that happened in just a minute, but here's where he is right now. Hunter Biden could face a maximum of 25 years in prison and $750,000 in fines. And NBC's Mike Mimley joins us now from Wilmington, Delaware. Mike, so the jury has now been seated. What do we know about who's on the jury, and what can we see tomorrow?
Well, things are off to a fast start here, Gadi. And when we talked about the case against Donald Trump in New York, we talked about how hard it would be to find an impartial jury in that city for the former president of the United States. Well, it was a different situation in Delaware, a small state politically. We're talking about not just the son of the sitting president, but somebody who represented this state in the U.S. Senate for 36 years. It's a very small state politically and geographically. But they were able to, just in one day, seat this jury 6 women, 6 men, as well as 4 women who are alternates. And there were 2 takeaways from the pool that was selected. One is a number of individuals who either themselves or had family members who own guns. Of course, that's very central to this case, as is the fact that several said that they had friends, family who suffered from drug addiction as well. And so that factored into the decision-making on both the part of the prosecution and the defense to allow those to be seated. So now that the jury is seated, tomorrow we will hear, as the first witness called, an FBI special agent who will really be the vehicle for the prosecution to begin laying out their case against Hunter Biden. We'll see them introduce evidence related to text messages that will, in their view, establish that Hunter Biden was still an active drug user when he purchased this firearm, as well as excerpts from Hunter Biden's own memoir in which he detailed at great length his battle with addiction and the deepest, darkest parts of that addiction at the time of this case. So we expect this trial will take about 2 to 3 weeks. It's interesting to note, as we saw the First Lady in the courtroom today, President Biden was in town at least today, that as this case goes on, the president will spend most of the next 2 weeks overseas, Gadi.
And Mike, all this is coming after last week's conviction of former President Trump. What are we hearing from President Biden and family members about Hunter's trial here?
Yeah, I think it was just so striking at the last minute to see the arrival this morning of First Lady Jill Biden on her birthday, no less. She sat for the entire day of jury selection behind her son, an important moment to show support for him at this time. And then not long after she arrived, we got this statement from the president himself, who said that as the sitting president, he is not going to comment on an ongoing legal matter, but as a father, as he put it, I have boundless love for my son. He has respect for the way he's been able to come back from his addiction. That statement, I think, also notable for how it spoke to something we saw in the jury selection process, the fact that so many American families have gone through similar situation with a loved one battling with addiction. That's why when you talk to Biden campaign advisors, they say to the extent that the Trump campaign might try to use this moment to their political advantage, it may backfire on them, because just as we saw Hunter Biden was the subject of attacks from the Trump campaign in 2020, he has been again in 2024. But it did not affect the president's ability to win 4 years ago, and they think the same will be the case this time around, Gadi.
Yeah, so interesting that the president wasn't there, but yet his picture is hanging in that courthouse. Mike Mimley, thank you very much. And let's now bring in NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Sinandela. Angela, let's go back a year real quick, if you don't mind. Can you remind us why that plea deal that Hunter was about to sign just imploded?
Gadi, it's so interesting because usually when the prosecution and defense agree on a plea deal, going in front of a judge is very easy. All the judge does is just sign off because both sides have already agreed. But in this case, what happened is that the judge asked a very important question regarding the immunity provisions in this agreement, and it revealed that both sides had very different opinions of what this agreement protected Hunter Biden from. As you can imagine, that's really the point of a plea agreement like this. So the defense thought that this would protect him from any offenses, any charges related to consulting, any of his business, period. Now, the prosecution, though, pushed back against that and not only denied that, but it even went so far as to suggest that they were possibly considering bringing future charges regarding to violations of foreign lobbying laws. So that's why it all fell apart. The judge realized there was a disagreement here. She refused to sign off on it. But also both sides just at that point decided they could not move forward, Gadi.
Such a potato situation. Now, turning to this indictment, it reads, Hunter provided, quote, a written statement on Form 4473 certifying that he was not lawfully addicted to a substance. How do prosecutors know that he was not addicted to any stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance? What are the receipts that they're going to be bringing to court here?
Gadi, this is such a good question because this is actually why this charge is often not brought. Look, federal prosecutors, they only bring charges they know they can win. Because it's really hard to pinpoint when someone was using drugs in the past, they tend not to even prosecute this charge whatsoever. However, this case is different. They seem to have so much evidence. And the first piece goes back to Hunter's own iCloud account, where prosecutors are alleging that they've extracted videos and photos of Hunter allegedly using crack cocaine in real time and also other drug paraphernalia at that time. Now, they also show that they have claimed that they have text messages between Hunter Biden and drug dealers arranging sales around the time of this gun purchase. But second of all, we also have his book. They intend to bring up excerpts from his own memoir where he himself alludes to his own drug use at that time. But the third, maybe most interesting part of all of this is that the prosecution has given us a list of 12 witnesses that they intend to call. And 3 of those witnesses appear to be women with whom he's had romantic relationships. Kathleen Buell, his ex-wife, Hallie Biden, the wife of his deceased brother, and also London Roberts, the mother with whom he had a child. And all 3 of these women will likely be testifying about their experiences seeing Hunter Biden being with him at the time of his alleged drug use. So all of these pieces of evidence together in totality are really going to be difficult for the defense, Gadi.
What do we know what the defense is going to be? I mean, is it going to be, no, that wasn't the box being checked, or is it going to be a time, difference, or do you have any insight as to what kind of defense we could see?
So I think the defense is going to have, as I said, a very hard time here. They will likely claim that he thought at that time that he was recovering, that perhaps he was entering rehab. He didn't consider himself to be an addict. Maybe the only wiggle room with this case, which is very weak from the defense's point, would be the idea of intent, that maybe at that time he didn't know that he was considering himself to be an unlawful drug user because he was intending to rehabilitate. But frankly, that is weak, Gadi. The evidence here the prosecution has is just enormous.
And the jury's been seated. We know that it's 6 men, 6 women. We've got people who have family who have a history of drug addiction. We've got a former Secret Service employee, if I understand it. A lot of gun owners there. What do you make of the jury? And compared to the Trump case, does the jury have a harder job with this one, an easier job? I mean, both are very high profile.
Yeah, it's very hard to read tea leaves from any jury whatsoever. I will say, though, that gun owners tend to be much more harder on defendants who appear to have been negligent with gun use, because I think it makes it harder for them then to keep their guns and to buy them more in the future. Also, any jury members who maybe have sympathy for drug addicts with addicts in their family could possibly have some wiggle room there and not want to just give criminal liability to Hunter Biden. But overall, in terms of is this easier or harder than the Trump case? Regardless of your views on the Trump case, how winnable that case was, this, I believe, is 10 times easier for the prosecution to win. It's really straightforward. It's whether or not he knew he was using drugs around that time, whether or not he purchased a gun, which it appears that he did. And those are really going to be determined by whether or not there is an enormous amount of evidence that shows that he was using drugs. And all the things I just discussed seem to really show that, Gadi.
Angela, a case we will be watching very closely. Thank you so much. And Mexico has just elected its first woman president, and the former senator slash physicist slash climate scientist Claudia Sheinbaum won by a big margin. And she reminded voters that she did not get here alone.
No llegó sola. Llegamos todas. Con nuestras heroínas que nos dieron patria, con nuestras ancestras, nuestras madres, nuestras hijas y nuestras nietas.
And Sheinbaum will be taking over for her mentor and current president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And she is inheriting a bunch of problems, from a border crisis to political violence, drug cartels, high murder rates, to a massive climate crisis and drought that's happening right now. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas from Mexico City. Hey, Guad, it seems like there is a lot to tackle for her on day one. What is the most important thing to the voters who just put her into office there?
Gadi, the most important challenge is going to be public safety in Mexico, and there are a lot of problems that surround public safety. So first off, voters kept saying they want a Mexico in which they can feel safe to walk around at night, feel safe to travel on the roads. visit the rural parts of the country and just not fear organized crime. So we know that Mexico has been suffering from organized crime or drug cartels or gangs, because now what's happened is that a lot of these criminal organizations have began working together. You've got the two big cartels in Mexico, Jalisco New Generation and the Sinaloa cartel, that are now connected to a lot of gangs. And experts say we're behind a lot of the violence that we saw during the election, a lot of the violence during that election cycle. So Sheinbaum has to figure out a way to tackle these issues, to fight organized crime that has gained only more power in rural parts of the country, and at the same time figure out what to do with impunity. One of the things that gives criminals so much power in Mexico is the fact that they can get away with the crimes. Experts say that more than 90% of crimes go unpunished in Mexico. So something has to be done to figure out a way to prosecute the crimes, to investigate the crimes, and make sure that criminals are held accountable. These are all going to be huge challenges, because the current administration of López Obrador, to which she is an ally, has chosen to take a very unique approach, saying they wanted to give hugs and not shoot at the criminals. That's the language they use in Spanish, because they wanted to tackle the causes. They wanted to offer opportunities, jobs, and education to individuals in the area where the organized crime will go recruit. So it's a different approach. We'll have to wait and see if she does something different in order to reduce the crime and to make people feel safe. When it comes to the environment, there is a lot of hope, Gadi, because she's a scientist. She has a PhD in energy engineering. So she might come up with different ideas for Mexico to think about renewable energy for the future. And also, Mexico has to deal with the climate crisis. There's a drought that has been affecting Mexico for the last few years, which could potentially get worse, just like the drought that they have in California. These are the issues that she'll have to start tackling, Gadi.
Yeah, I could imagine a sigh of relief for some people in Mexico City. How bad is the drought there when it comes to water supplies?
Well, there's so many videos and photos of lakes in Mexico, in Michoacan, around Mexico City, lakes that used to have boats, that used to have people visit for the weekend, that used to have water that was used for communities that are now completely gone, Gadi. So when it comes to the drought, it's very difficult to understand exactly what it means, because we can argue that there was less rain the year before. Perhaps certain communities have used more water, so we don't have an exact understanding. What we have are visual images of lakes that have been drying out and parts of Mexico City that have suffered from water shortages. There's been neighbors that haven't had water for a few days. It's happened in different parts of the country. We know that Monterrey in the north part of Mexico has been suffering from droughts from the last few years. So different communities are dealing with droughts in different ways. There's communities in the southern part of Mexico, in Chiapas, where they do have water, but they don't have plants to clean the water. So it's different issues that communities here are facing when it comes to the water, Gadi.
All that she is very familiar with, so it's going to be interesting to see what she does. Gadi, we're also expecting some pretty big changes to the U.S. asylum policy this week, and as we've seen in the past, so much of any kind of immigration policy really has to do with the White House's relationship with the government of Mexico. Any idea how Sheinbaum's going to get along with the Biden administration?
Gadi, so the issue of immigration is another big issue that Sheinbaum is going to have to tackle. So first off, she's already said that she would be able to get along with Biden, which there's already a relationship, right, between the current Mexican president and President Biden. Sheinbaum is the same party. So the easiest transition would be for Sheinbaum to communicate with Biden. But if Trump were to win the election in the U.S., she said she will have a positive relationship with him, the way Andrés Manuel López Obrador had a relationship with Trump. Let's hear from Sheinbaum speaking about her relationship with the United States.
Los Estados Unidos habrá una relación de amistad, respeto mutuo e igualdad como hasta ahora ha sido, y siempre defenderemos a las y a los mexicanos que se encuentran del otro lado de la frontera.
So very important. She says she will always defend the Mexicans that are on the north side of the border. Gadi, it's interesting because the Mexican government announced that Mexico has asked the Biden administration to give legal status to more than 5 million Mexicans that are in the U.S. that have been living there as undocumented. All of this as Mexico is helping the U.S. to keep the migrants that are coming from South and Central America from going north to the U.S. border. So Mexico is doing what they can to stop another surge from coming to the U.S. border, and the U.S. will have to negotiate with Sheinbaum moving forward an immigration policy that works both for the U.S. and Mexico, because they have to be allies. Mexico also has an increase of migrants arriving, thousands every day. So they have to work together to solve the immigration crisis. Gadi?
We are the closest of neighbors, hopefully the closest of friends. Juan Venegas, thank you. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, more details on the deadly shooting of a Minneapolis police officer. NBC's Maggie Vespa has the latest, including who police have named as the shooter. Plus, a volcano in Hawaii is erupting for the first time since 1974. We've got that story and more headlines from out west later this hour. And doctors think they have discovered a potential game changer for transplant patients. It is a breakthrough that could eliminate immunosuppressants, and that is huge. Dr. Akshay Sayal has the details in tonight's Future of Everything.
I think the idea that you can actually be off of anti-rejection drugs for the rest of that life, I think there's a lot of benefit for that.
Hey, welcome back. Here are some of the headlines we're watching tonight. The Gilgo Beach murder suspect might be facing another homicide charge. Sources are telling our local affiliate that Rex Heuermann is expected to be arraigned on a new charge later this week. Now, Heuermann was originally arrested after a string of bodies were found on Long Island. He has since pled not guilty. And rapper Sean Kingston was booked in a South Florida jail today. He is facing $1 million in fraud charges. He and his mom were both arrested a few weeks ago, and prosecutors say they stole money, jewelry, even an Escalade, and some sort of organized scheme. And Dr. Anthony Fauci testifying on Capitol Hill today as members of the House grilled him on the origins of COVID and the U.S.'s response to the pandemic. Fauci pushing back on claims he played a part in a cover-up of the COVID origins.
The accusation being circulated that I influenced these scientists to change their minds by bribing them with millions of dollars in grant money is absolutely false and simply preposterous.
Now, the hearing got heated real quick as House Republicans continue to look into if U.S.-funded research in China may have played any role in how the pandemic started. And there's a big cucumber recall. Cucumbers shipped to 14 states are now being flagged because they could be contaminated with salmonella. The FDA is testing those cucumbers and checking to see if they're connected to an outbreak happening right now. And Spotify is jacking up prices for a bunch of its plans. They say it's to invest in their product features and to innovate the user experience. A premium plan will go up $1 to $11.99, while a family plan jumps $3, up from $16.99 to $19.99. This is the second time Spotify has raised prices in the U.S. in the last year. And tonight we've got some more details about the death of Minneapolis police officer Jamal Mitchell. He was shot and killed on Thursday by a man who authorities say he was trying to help. Now, according to authorities, Officer Mitchell was responding to a call of a double shooting when he saw two people hurt. The officer approached one of them and asked if he was okay and needed help. And that's when investigators say that man pulled out a gun and started shooting. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa. Maggie, authorities have released new details over the weekend, including the name of the shooter. What more do we learn here?
Right. I mean, Gadi, you and I talked on Friday, and there were so many questions that were still hanging over the shooting. So we got some more answers over the weekend. The name of the shooter, they say, is Mustafa Mohammed. They say he's 35 years old, and he was reportedly wanted on gun charges. That being said, we still don't know anything about kind of the motive behind this, why authorities say he would have shot Officer Mitchell, Jamal Mitchell, who they say was trying to help him. They say it appeared that Mohammed was injured when Officer Mitchell pulled over on his way to responding to that double shooting call. So again, at this point, still a lot of questions as to why at all this happened and what role, if any, Mohammed played in the original shooting that brought officers there. But suffice it to say, authorities say once that shooting happened, once he shot Officer Mitchell, they say two other officers intervened and got into a gun battle with Mohammed, and that is how he died as well. So still just an incredibly complex investigation in Minneapolis, a city, Gadi, that, of course, is still grieving in the wake of all of this.
Yeah. And we saw that procession. We've been hearing more and more about Jamal's history of heroism. What else can you tell us about his legacy?
You know what's crazy about it? He was 36 years old. He's a dad. He was engaged. He'd only been on the force for less than 2 years. And they said back in sort of early 2023, like February 2023, it was his third day on the job. And he and his partner were responding to a call. They came upon a house on fire. They raced inside. There were no firefighters there, just these two cops. And they got an elderly couple out of that house in time, like woke them up and told them their house was on fire, got them outside. And we saw Officer Mitchell on body camera video. I think late last week, he was talking to the elderly woman, telling her that he'll get shoes for her, that he'll help her out to the front lawn to get her out of this burning home. So he and his partner were awarded, given kind of this act of heroism award. And again, he was 3 days into this gig. So that's kind of how he got his name on the Minneapolis police force. And he's just been lauded as a hero ever since. He told our affiliate CARE at the time, he said, you know, it's not what we expect being police and having to run into a burning building. We're not firefighters. But he said, when you're on the front lines, that's just kind of the risk you assume. And those are words that are obviously haunting given what's happened to him now, Gadi. So a lot of people just remembering him for how brave he definitely was.
Yeah, killed for trying to help somebody else. Maggie, thank you. And coming up, Hawaii's most active volcano is at it again. We're going to show you the latest eruption. But first, you got to see this. Eating the perfect hot dog is part of enjoying a baseball game, right? But what if your hot dog came straight from heaven? Seattle Mariners fans snagged their snacks when hot dogs were parachuted into the stadium during the game. It was part of a new stadium promotion called Hot Dogs from Heaven. And what made this even more magical, blasting Belinda Carlisle's Heaven is a Place on Earth as those dogs descended. You can sure bet this won't be the last hot dog drop for the Mariners. We'll be right back. Hey there, welcome back. And here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. A 2.5-mile stretch of California coast was shut down yesterday after a 46-year-old swimmer got bitten by a shark. He was about 100 yards off ashore doing a group swim event when he was attacked. The shark bit him in his torso, his arm, and his hand, but thankfully he got away after he punched that shark in the face. And Colorado Governor Jared Polis has signed a bill that makes election officials bring voting to jails for statewide general elections. That means close to 61 jails and detention centers in Colorado will offer in-person voting for the November election, but convicted felons still can't vote. And a section of the Kilauea volcano started erupting this morning for the first time in 50 years. Some areas of the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park could see elevated gases, but thankfully there are no lava threats to nearby communities. And it was a busy day on Wall Street. We're talking deja vu with meme stocks surging in a moment. But first, shares are up for Paramount, with CNBC reporting that the company has agreed to a merger with Skydance. But that proposal still has one key hurdle left before it's a done deal. And CNBC's Julia Borstein has the details.
Paramount's shares surging Monday after CNBC's David Faber reported that the entertainment company and Skydance have agreed to merge, a deal that could be announced later this week and is awaiting sign-off from Paramount's controlling shareholder, Sherry Redstone. The deal would pay her $2 billion for Paramount's parent company, National Amusements. Skydance would buy out nearly half of Class B Paramount shares for $15 per share and would contribute $1.5 billion to Paramount's balance sheet, giving Skydance and its private equity partner Redbird 2/3 of the company. The stock gained 7.5% on Monday on the clarity and the premium for the shares. Skydance CEO David Ellison is expected to be CEO of the new company, and Redbird's chairman of sports and media, Jeff Shell, also formerly NBC Universal CEO, is expected to be president. Here is what would be on these two men's agenda, according to sources close to the situation. First, they'd be aggressively managing the company's linear business. Second, they'd be figuring out a new path for streaming, possibly including finding some partners for Paramount Plus. And three, they'd be figuring out how to better monetize the company's intellectual property across its various platforms. Paramount Global is hosting its annual shareholder meeting on Tuesday morning. Redstone indicating that they're reviewing the deal, but that they won't be announcing anything by then. Back over to you.
President Biden is trying to turn up the pressure on Israel to accept a ceasefire deal. We're going to get to that in just a minute, but first, let's take a quick look around the world. We're going to start in Japan, where a 5.9 earthquake hit the country's region of Ishikawa. That was followed by a 4.8 aftershock and a bunch of smaller quakes. Now, no tsunamis were reported, but at least 5 homes that were damaged in the deadly January quake did collapse. And after 30 years in power, the African National Congress lost its majority in last week's South African election. It is a huge blow as the ANC previously won every election since the end of apartheid back in 1994. Without a majority, the group now needs a coalition with another party to govern. They have 2 weeks to elect the country's next president. And over to Panama, where the country is preparing to evacuate one of its islands because of rising sea levels. Almost 300 families have been forced to leave Gadi, Sugdub, and they're going to be relocating to Panama's mainland. Dozens more of these coastal communities are expected to be forced to relocate in the coming decades, and experts say the move is a direct consequence of climate change. And commemorations for the 80th anniversary of D-Day have kicked off in Normandy. Check out all of these parachutists paying tribute by jumping out of World War II-era planes now in peaceful skies. Ceremonies will be taking place all week long. And tonight, Israel says that 4 more hostages have died in Hamas custody, and their deaths come as, quote, Israel's 3-pronged ceasefire proposal backed by President Biden didn't seem any closer to becoming a reality. NBC's international correspondent Matt Bradley has more.
We just heard from the Israeli Defense Forces that 4 of the hostages remaining in the Gaza Strip are now thought by the IDF to have died. They did not say exactly how they died, but they said to the IDF that intelligence information indicated that these 4 people, 3 of them who are over the age of 80, have not survived. Now, that is something that we're hearing with increasing regularity from the Israelis, and there's thought to be about 125 Israelis who are still being held in and underneath the Gaza Strip by Hamas and its partners, but some 80 are thought to only still be alive. Now, a lot of them may have been killed by Israeli bombardments themselves, but this latest announcement just today about these 4 who died didn't include any information on the circumstances of their deaths, but there was a level of certainty from the Israeli government that these 4 men had been killed. 3 of them had already appeared in a video back in December released by Hamas in which they pled for their lives and criticized the Israeli government for not negotiating with Hamas in order to release them. Now, all of this happens against a background of feverish negotiations over a final deal that would presumably create some sort of ceasefire temporarily that could lead to negotiations for a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of all Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip and the release of all of those remaining some 80 hostages in the Gaza Strip. But once again, even though we've been hearing equivocating from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and Hamas all weekend long and into this week, it seems as though the 2 main positions of these 2 groups, Israel and Hamas, have not changed. The Israelis still insisting, especially with Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right government, that Hamas must be completely destroyed, whereas Hamas is insisting that there must be a full and permanent ceasefire and the final withdrawal of all Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip before all of the hostages are to be released. These are 2 positions that are increasingly untenable, and even negotiations, even months of negotiations, haven't been able to bridge that gap. And it looks as though there's new pessimism into this latest round of negotiations, despite Joe Biden's announcement on Friday that the 2 sides were getting closer to a deal.
Matt Bradley, thank you. And it has been well documented that Russian trolls tried to mess with our elections back in 2020. And now Russian propagandists have a new target, the Olympic Games in Paris, set to begin next month. NBC's Keir Simmons has the latest.
Tonight, with Paris gearing up for this summer's Olympics, 2 reports warn of Russian disinformation targeting the Games, including fake videos aimed at spreading fear of violence and damaging the reputation of the Olympics. Produced, a Microsoft report says, by prolific Russian influence actors. This bogus documentary, posted last summer, titled Olympics Has Fallen, featured a deepfake Tom Cruise, while a second report, published tomorrow by US cyber experts Recorded Futures, seen by NBC News, says Russia is the most likely primary state actor to target the Olympics with a disruptive cyber attack. President Putin furious with France for its support of President Zelensky, and Putin angry at the IOC for banning athletes from competing under the Russian flag because of the war.
The Olympics is just a great target if you are Russia. Russia has a long-standing beef with the IOC over the expulsion of Russian athletes for cheating.
Paris has invested billions to beef up security, facing challenges, one of the reports says, not seen since London 2012, from protests to cyber attacks, warning cyber criminals will be attracted to such high-profile events and the chance to target the public with email phishing scams and suspicious links.
So these are things that we all should be aware of, and hopefully we can all enjoy a fantastic Paris Games free from cyber threats.
This week here in Paris, experts, including from the US, will gather for an annual cyber summit, predicting a spectacular games and a wave of cyber attacks.
Keir Simmons, thank you. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. And tonight, scientists are close to a so-called holy grail when it comes to organ transplants. Dr. Akshay Syal is here next to explain the medical breakthrough, so stay tuned. And now for tonight's future of everything, a groundbreaking new therapy that could one day change organ transplants. For decades, scientists have been searching for the holy grail of transplants, and that is a way to stop the body from rejecting the new organ without having to take drugs that weaken the immune system. Well, today, a new trial is providing some hope for millions of patients. And NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Syal breaks it all down for us.
At just 30 years old, Alex Hernandez has already faced a lifetime of health issues, fighting kidney problems since he was a baby. His childhood riddled with trips to the hospital.
Yeah, looking back at it, it was tough. Like, I would sometimes cry because, I'm like, why do I got to deal with all this that's going on with my health? All these other people are fine.
In college, things took a turn for the worse. His kidneys failing, forcing him to go on dialysis.
Did you think I may never get off of this?
At one time I did.
His only hope was a kidney transplant, but that meant he'd have to spend the rest of his life taking immunosuppressants every day to stop his body from rejecting the organ. These drugs, which can be up to 30 pills a day, can have nasty side effects, including stomach problems, increased risk of infection and cancer, and can even damage the new organ itself.
So one of the major drugs that's purpose is to prevent the body from rejecting a kidney can actually harm the kidney itself.
Exactly.
Dr. Sanjeev Akina, medical director of the kidney transplant program at Loyola Medicine in suburban Chicago, is one of a handful of doctors around the world trying to solve that problem by developing therapies to help with organ tolerance.
So I think when we say tolerance, we're basically saying is can the body accept someone else's kidney without rejecting the kidney? I think the idea that you can actually be off of anti-rejection drugs for the rest of that life, I think there's a lot of benefit for that.
Now, they may have found a way using stem cells taken from the donor.
So the stem cells, what they do is they basically reprogram your immune system. They basically tell your immune system to recognize that this donor kidney coming in is actually going to be part of your own.
The cells get implanted 11 days after the new kidney, helping the patient's immune system become a hybrid of both the donor and the recipient, preventing it from attacking the new kidney and allowing the patient to stop taking all of those immunosuppressive drugs. A new phase 3 trial presented today at the American Transplant Congress found that after 2 years, almost 85% of patients were off all the anti-rejection meds. Doctors are hopeful this could one day apply to other types of transplants.
How do you feel?
Good.
Alex underwent his transplant 3 years ago. He's no longer on any immunosuppressive drugs. Now a dental student, Alex says he has a second chance to live a full life.
I'm able to work out. I'm able to, play sports. I'm just grateful that I can do all those things now.
Wow. And Dr. Syal joins us now. Dr. Syal, it seems like stem cells to the rescue again, potentially. How big of a deal is this?
Hey, Gadi, these are really encouraging, really exciting results. As you mentioned in the intro there, you know, the word tolerance, allowing the body to accept the new organ is really what scientists have been after for decades, really called the holy grail of organ transplantation. Now, I should add, you know, in this case, Alex did get an organ from his sister, so these are very closely genetically related people. And really the next step here, Gadi, is can we expand this to the millions of people out there who may have, you know, gotten an organ from somebody they're not related to? Because, you know, as you heard in the piece, these drugs can be really nasty. They can have stomach problems, you know, if you were to get COVID or the flu, you would get way sicker than, you know, you and I would. So really a lot of people are trying to get off of these drugs. A lot of people looking forward to a day where they may not have to take these drugs, and a little bit of hope even in this small trial here today, Gadi.
Yeah, seems like a lot of hope there. We need our immune systems, and yet people need these new organs. So where do you see this going from here?
Yeah, a couple things need to happen. You know, this was a trial of about 19 patients, so we need to see this replicated in a larger study. I mean, Gadi, really the next step is can we expand this to people who aren't so genetically similar, right? So, for example, if you were to give me a kidney, could I eventually be off those immunosuppressants? That's really the ultimate goal here. And also, can we expand this to other organs, right? So kidneys are the most transplanted organ here in the United States, but there are other organs that we, you know, heart, for example, or liver that we're hoping to expand this to. So really a lot to look forward to, and just a little bit of hope here today could, you know, for millions of people out there who are taking up to 30 pills a day of those drugs that weaken their immune system.
Absolutely. And doctor, if you ever need a kidney, I got you, brother. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Appreciate it.
That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.